Crystal, and welcome back to my kitchen. If you recall yesterday when we were together, we made our first batch of dough and then we put it in the pizza tins to rise. And if you recall, the dough was about the size of the palm of my hand. But now let me show you what it looks like. It's been rising overnight since yesterday evening. It's now Monday evening. We put these in Sunday evening. They all look a little different, but they've more than doubled their size. And back on this one in particular, remember how I mentioned that I put a little bit of olive oil on both sides of the dough? See how it's doing this, has like a little bit of a crust, and then there's the other part of the dough that doesn't have a crust. We're going to use all of this, and it'll all be delicious. So with that, let's get started. This is kind of the tricky part of the process that I was telling you about. And because we've let the dough sit for so long, I just want to show you how it's a little bit sticky, it's a little bit flimsy. So I have some parchment paper here on my clean countertops, and I took a little bit of my flour and put that right on top of my parchment paper. So now I'm going to turn this over, give it a little bit of a tap, and it comes right out. And you can't really roll this at this point because it's too sticky. So what we're going to do is we're going to use some of the extra flour to put on top, and I'll just use my hands to start flattening it out until we have a little bit of extra flour in here where we might be able to roll a little bit. And just keep adding a little bit of flour until you can work with it. So. Okay. Now what I'll do is I'll take my rolling pin. This is homemade from my hometown, and parents of my friends of my parents gave it to my dad and my mom, and my mom gave it to me. My dad was a woodworker, and he also made things out of wood. So this is a redwood rolling pin, and you can only roll a little bit, and then you have to add more flour. So this is definitely the messiest part of the process because flour gets everywhere, but that's okay. Just gonna put a little bit more. And I don't know if you noticed or if you caught it, but I did put flour on my rolling pin too to try to keep the dough from sticking. And my parchment papers, I just took a sheet off of the roll, and it's probably about 10 inches wide. And I'm rolling this dough so thin, it's almost paper thin. Okay. So now pick it up so you can see just how thin it is. Okay. So let me get that up close to the camera. Okay. And you can just see how thin it is. It's almost as thin as the paper. And that's perfect. Trust me, when you cook this pizza dough, it's going to firm up beautifully, it won't be limp, and it'll taste great. Let me do the second one. Move this one over. Okay. So, again, I just use my spatula to kind of lift it up off the bottom of the tin a little bit. And then I flip the tin over. And it usually comes right out. And again, that's because I had put a little bit of olive oil in the bottom of the tin before I put the dough in, and then I had rolled the dough a little bit. Okay. Just gonna need some flour on top. And this is where we're using that leftover flour. You might even need a little bit more than what you had left over. The dough will tell you what it needs. And you just put enough on there so that the dough isn't sticking to your hands and sticking all over the rolling pin. Okay. All right. Okay. more flour on the rolling pin. I always add extra flour to the rolling pin. Okay. Now, if you didn't have as much time to prepare your dough and let it rest, or maybe you are okay having your pizza dough a little, your pizza crust a little thicker, you don't have to let it rest for 24 hours like I did. I've let it rest for 35 hours. It was great. But I think for me, the perfect amount of time is about 24 hours. So if you want to have pizza for Saturday night, start your dough late Friday afternoon or Friday evening. This one we started Sunday evening, and now it's Monday evening, and we're rolling it out. Okay, so now I've got another one that is paper thin. I mean, it's almost as thin as the parchment paper. And it's going to be perfect. My hands are all floured up, otherwise I would move the camera over. I'll just try to bring this over here to the camera so you can see how thin it is. And see right along here, along this edge, it's just almost as thin as the paper. Okay. Now what I like to do is I like to brush the crust with just a little bit of olive oil. And where did I put my brush? Here it is. Okay. So I just used a small little barbecue style brush. And then I take my olive oil and I just drizzle a little bit of olive oil on the crust all around the edge and just a little bit in the middle. You don't want to drown it in the olive oil. You just want to have a little bit on there. So just a couple of swirls is about all I do. And then I take the brush and brush it all over. Okay. There's really no measurement for that. It's just, like I said, a few swirls. Try to get it on the edges if you can. And then spread it with your brush. Now meanwhile, I've had my oven turned on at 500 degrees. I need just a little more olive oil. I've been preheating the pizza stone in my oven at 500 degrees. And it's best if you can do that for at least a half an hour or maybe 45 minutes. I think mine has been preheating just about that time. But the pizza stone takes a little while to heat up. Okay, now, you don't actually have to use parchment paper to cook on your pizza stone. You can cook right on your pizza stone, but with this recipe, because I make it so thin and the gluten in the dough has broken down, you really can't maneuver the dough from the countertop to the pizza stone if it's not on the parchment paper. So I just go ahead and always do it on the parchment paper, and this works whether I cook it in the oven on the pizza stone or out on the grill. So for the pizza stone, I just have it on the parchment paper. But you can also cook pizza on the grill, and I do it all the time, especially in the warm weather that we get out here in the summertime on the East Coast. The last thing I want to do is turn my oven on for an hour to preheat a pizza stone and then keep it on. I'd have to crank the air up really high. So what I do instead is I will take the parchment paper and put that on top of an equal sized piece of aluminum foil. And so then you'd have your aluminum foil on bottom, then the parchment paper, and then the pizza dough on top of the parchment paper. And you can cook your pizzas just like that, right on top of your grill without a pizza stone. And I do that all the time. They come out great. I cook, I usually preheat the grill for about 5 or 10 minutes. And I preheat it on high, and then I turn it to about medium to cook the pizzas. And if my crusts are pre-cooked, like what we're doing right now, then I only have to cook the pizzas for 8 to 10 minutes on the grill. Pizzas with mushrooms tend to take longer because they have the water in them, or if you have a lot of meat and if your meat has any grease or oil, like if you put a lot of pepperoni on your pizza, then you'd have to cook it a little bit longer. But you can just monitor it to monitor when the crust is done. So with that, let me just rinse my hands. I wish you were here with me in my kitchen, because It's kind of weird just being the only one here talking to the video. It would be a lot more fun if you were here in my kitchen and we were having a conversation together. But be that as it may, this is how it is. I encourage you, if you have any questions or feedback, or if you want to share your pictures of your sourdough pizza crust, please share them with me through my channel. You can subscribe to my channel, you can leave comments here on the video, and you can send me an email, whatever works best. Okay, so a few years ago, I shared some of my sourdough starter with a coworker, and she in turn left this nice big pizza paddle for me at my desk at work, at my day job. And I use it all the time, and I remembered my friend Geraldine fondly whenever I'm making pizza. So I'm just going to use this. I'm going to slide these in one at a time on my pizza stone. Oh, okay, just like that. Don't forget to set your timer when you're pre-cooking your crust, because if you don't set your timer, you could easily forget that they're in the oven. So, with this step of the process, I'm pre-cooking the crust. I'm just going to cook them for 3 minutes at 500 degrees, and then I'm going to take them out and I'm going to let them sit right here on my granite countertop to cool. When they're totally cooled, I'll probably stack multiple pizza crusts up together in an extra large Ziploc bag, and then I can freeze them. And then later, when I want to make a pizza for dinner, I just take one out of the freezer, put the sauce and the toppings on it, and throw it right in the oven. What you don't want to do when you're using a frozen homemade pizza crust is you don't want to defrost the pizza crust and then assemble the pizza and then put it in the oven, because that you could end up with ruining the crust. With like a soggy crust, you could end up ruining it. So again, when you're doing that, preheat the oven, preheat the pizza stone, and then take your pizza crust out of the freezer, assemble it, throw it on the pizza stone. And at that point, when you're cooking them in the oven on the pizza stone, you would want to cook them for about 7 to 8 minutes. And you'll have to just monitor it depending on what toppings you've put on there and such. So anyway, good luck, and I hope you enjoy making your own sourdough pizza crust at home, and I look forward to hearing from you. Thank you.